she moves through the knots of cobbled streets in downtown Correggio. Her son is in trouble. Her little boy is in trouble. That is all she can manage to think of as she winds through this alley and that. Her shawl has a touch of red amongst the blackened pavers and the colorless rainbow of Mussolini's propaganda. The man has the face of a battered ape, and somehow this poor and broken nation has scrounged up enough money to pulp all the forests of Europe and Asia in order to plaster that stupid face on the side of every building. He is watching, she thinks to herself, while moving deeper and deeper into the heart of the city. It's as true as not that those posters in his dark, printed eyes are following her. Benito's fascists lack the organizational strength, the raw power of their Nazi brothers in the north, but they make up for their shortcomings with sheer zeal. His papers on the wall are a reminder that he is always there, always watching, that the eyes of your neighbors are his eyes as well, and it's possible, if given the right incentive, that your own could belong to him someday. The worst of all this is that those millions of eyes have come to rest on her boy, her precious little Giuseppe. So much of her suffering in this cursed world, this life her own mother had put a foul and jealous hex on, had been worth it to make him a better man than his father or grandfather could have ever been. He was, a college boy until Hitler's little crony Mussolini decided to drag Italy into the fray with the British and Russian barbarians. And so began the draft. Giuseppe, her son, her pride, her greatest love, a sweetheart of a boy who had never heard her fly unless he had to, was now in a position where they turned that tiniest spark of potential aggression into a forest fire. He was of the age for conscription, and so they'd take him from her, send him north to slug it out with those savages in the frigid, swampy holes they call home. God damn them. She had worked her hands to the bone to provide him an education. She had conspired with every force in this world and the next to protect him from the hardships of life, and to keep him safe from the lingering curse her own mother had draped over her shoulders like a yoke when she'd been married. Mia madre, Leonardo thinks, as she ducks away from a parade processional, really nothing more than a procession of maybe 20 steely-eyed fascists carrying signs promising victory against the so-called Allied powers. The war had meant little to Leonardo before it had snagged her son in its teeth. The fascists were a growing nuisance, but this was Italy, the land where empires rose and fell like the tide. Greater men than Mussolini would one day rule the country, and worse men still, and always and forever, towns like Correggio would live on, even as those dictators passed to dust. The greatest inconvenience now was the thickening distrust and prosecution of the occult and those who practiced it. Women of the trade, gypsies, bush wizards, and others were branded charlatans and even charged with crimes. Leonardo herself had done a few years for frauds related to that, but fascist ignorance was no longer her concern. Now all she could think of was her precious Giuseppe. The boy had done his part to calm his aging and worried mother. He had told her that the war would pass over like a dark cloud, that he would just sit in the rear and work on the engines or the like. He had no dreams of being a hero. But the vision she'd suffered through in sleep the past few nights said different. Taunting nightmares of darkness wrought with meaning. In that space beyond the waking world, Leonardo had seen her children as the babies she'd first held in her arms. Sweet and rosy things with bright eyes and hair like silk. Dark hands had taken them from her and placed them in shining white coffins. 13 tiny boxes carried and laid on the midnight soil of Lacedonia, her childhood home. In the vision there is a great rumble in the earth and the dirt splits like a black mouth, swallowing the caskets like shortbreads. When she awakes, the terrible truth of the dream destroys her. Yes, she has lost 13 children, but 13 is where it stops. Enough. Leonardo finds the place she's been hunting for, a simple steel door with numbers and letters marked in red paint. She smells a dull, rotten spice burning in the space beyond the entrance and slips in before she can be noted. The scent of occult practice is obvious in the dusky hallway. Leonardo takes a moment to fix up the thick folds of her dress and compose herself. This is not her first visit, though every time feels as such. The faint glow of candlelight far ahead steadies her nerves somehow, and she soon glides toward it like a hesitant, yet eager, hawk moth. This is the one place the fascists must not find. A hidden entrance into the catacombs beneath Correggio. The walls are brick and then a rougher sort of stacked and mortared stone. There is a thick wooden door emblazoned with Renaissance gilding, and beyond that, a simple curtain of dry reeds. The smell of spice is so thick her mind is all but lost in it. Here there are skulls on the walls, their jaws broken in half and set at odd angles through their eye sockets. The woman Leonardo seeks is positioned behind a simple wooden table, adorned with a red and gold silk cloth of the same cut and pattern that drapes her shoulders. Her face is as sallow and pale as the skulls. Her smile might be that of a corpse in rictus, but Leonardo sees it deepen as she steps into the flickering red candlelight. The woman gestures to the seat opposite hers, with an arm too thick and healthy, Leonardo thinks, to belong to such a deathly face. "Ghost of your mother stands behind you," the woman says. Her voice comes and goes like wind through a keyhole. It is colored with affectations of old Rome. "The ghosts of your children are badly sewn to the flesh they wear. Perhaps soon they will break free." Leonardo buries her tears in the folds of her palms beaten and worn from kitchen work. Her skin feels tough and hard over her eyes, discomforting. She begs the old gypsy for an answer, a path that will lead to a world where little white coffins aren't swallowed by the unforgiving earth of Italia. The woman listens to the plea, then speaks. "Trade then," she says, waving her arm along the wall. Leonardo's eyes follow, seeing the splinters where the jawbones have been snapped along their front bends. "Like wishbones," she thinks. "Tell me of your past and I will suggest a future to you," the woman says. "And for a price, I will provide the tool to reach that future." Without pause, Leonardo speaks.
Young Leonardo's mother hates her. She knows. And there is nothing she can do about it. It is not even the respectable sort of hate you reserve for an enemy. Something that burns with enough heat to fill a life with some sort of flame. No, it is the petty and distant kind of hatred that has burned all the trees of the soul to ash. It is from the start of the desert, where nothing will ever bloom again. She remembers that her father had affection for her, more at least than her mother. But that affection had waned along with his body as sickness stole him out of her life. He had died, and her mother had never spoken of him again. She had remarried instead, had borne children whom she loved and doted on like any healthy mother would. Leonardo remained in the home like a stain on the counter that just will not come out until you eventually stop scrubbing, drop something on top of it, and forget it was even there. Life is bleak. Sometimes she sees the clouds floating over Lacedonia and wonders what it would be like to be one of them, to float high over the people and buildings, mingling amongst your own kind and never needing to change to fit in, for people to look up at you in awe then and again, to be able to simply disappear when you wanted. Young Leonardo tries to kill herself twice before she turns 17, attempts her mother scoffs at and treats like an inconvenience. Leonardo's not sure if she finds love through rebuking her mother's efforts to set up a marriage with her cousin, or if she discovers it with the peasant Raphael Pansardi naturally. Either would make sense. Her mother could care less about her life on the best of days, unless there was a small bit of happiness she could interfere in. But Leonarda had also developed an obsession for digging at her mother as she grew into her early 20s. Needling the woman by going against her wishes was a new and profound joy. The Leonarda who had once desired the love of her mother above all things was gone now. Had hanged herself twice, in fact, in order to make way for this stronger woman. Leonarda's mother insists she marry the faceless cousin. But Leonarda wants Raphael. There is nothing extraordinary about him. He is as common as dirt and only somewhat less poor. His love is lukewarm and often insufficient. It's no stretch to believe the match with the cousin could be better than the coupling with Raphael, but her mother hates Raphael, and so Leonarda loves him absolutely. Her marriage is a simple and happy affair, marred only by a single outburst from her mother, who at some point slides out of the wedding party and finds Raphael and Leonarda together beside the dance floor. Her face is turned up in a sneer, much as it had been at her daughter's birth. Raphael extends a nervous hand to his mother-in-law, but she turns and spits in his face, a thick glob of mucus that dangles from his cheek like a tear, though doesn't cause the man to exit the room. Leonarda opens her mouth to shout the woman down, but her mother's eyes are wide and horrifying. The world stills. "All your children, puta," she hisses. "You can have your pathetic husband, but as for your spawn, you will watch all of them die." Leonarda feels something like a hot metal poker in the base of her spine, a pain so sudden and severe it nearly sucks the breath out of her mouth. She shouldn't be able to move, but she does, slapping her mother across the cheek so hard the woman spins and falls to the floor. Leonarda's mother stands, wipes herself off, and spits again, before leaving without looking back. This will be their final interaction, though they'll be forever tethered by the dark curse invoked on that day.
No one should feel unsafe at home. Period. Fear should have no jurisdiction in a place like home. That's been Simply Safe's mission from day one. Clearly, it hasn't been a priority for me and the wife. What was that noise? Karen. Care Christ, she sleeps like the dead. God, those blankets look inviting. A lot of good they'll do once whatever's rummaging around out there comes in here. Simply Safe blankets your whole home with protection. They have around-the-clock professional monitoring, making sure police are on the way when you need them. The security sensors are tiny, blending in with your home so you won't notice them. The Verge calls Simply Safe the best home security, and it's a wire cutter, top pick. As more than 3 million Simply Safe customers already know, it feels good to fear less. You'll even see a commercial about it during the big game this Sunday. I hope to be sitting with my doll, watching our big screen. Though that's unlikely now, since I think I just heard it detached from the wall out there. Karen, don't be like us. Protect your home today. You'll get free shipping on any system order. Just visit simplysafe.com/monstro. That's simplysafe.com/monstro. MONSTRUO. To protect your home and family today. simplysafe.com/monstro. Gerber. Leonarda comes to, on the cobbles beside an unmarred length of wall that supports an old bakehouse. The windows are soaped over and there is a notice of closure from the fascist government nailed over the door. She puts a hand to her head, trying to remember how she came to this place. Memories of a fat-armed, corpse-faced woman flit through her mind and are gone, replaced only with a strange feeling of accomplishment. A hollow-hearted reminder of a new debt. A stack of possessions lie outside the bakery, originally thrown onto the street along with the former owner, no doubt. A few pots and pans, all too rusted to ever be used again, are most of what remains. But Leonarda finds something else glowing beneath the pile of metal clutter. She upends the bent iron door of an old oven and rescues a book of some sort, bound in red leather. The surface is badly worn and stippled with discolored flour, but the pages are of a thick leather velour. She's not surprised to find it's a cookbook, though the words are written in archaic Italian. She flips through, page by page, slowly beginning to feel as if somebody has gone to great lengths to play some kind of joke on her. Then she finds it. A picture of her boy, black and white, is stuck between two of the pages. His face is warm and smiling, and he's wearing his soldier's uniform, but there's something not quite right with the scene behind him. The background of the photo is sloshing and churning, as though her Giuseppe is falling into a river of blood. Leonarda cries out, and the eyes of her son spark to life. He looks back in terror, and his arms pinwheel before splashing into the bubbling, bloody soup, the flesh boiling from his bones as he is absorbed by it. She screams and releases the pitcher, which catches a sudden powerful breeze and flits off down the street. Leonarda watches it disappear, then turns her horrified eyes to the entry on the page the pitcher had saved. She reads it for a long time, her finger running up and down every line again and again until, finally, she clutches the thing to her chest and bursts into tears, nodding and stumbling down the street, back toward home. It was a few months before she finally decided on Ermelina. There is a moment when her friend is standing in the door of Leonarda's second-hand shop and kitchen where Leonarda doesn't let the door open all the way. She thinks of the ancient fleshy cookbook sitting on her counter and swallows. Her throat is dry. Her hands are shaking. She almost wants to vomit, even, but she fights down the urge and smiles instead. Ermelina gives her an odd look. "I'm sorry," Leonarda says. "The door got stuck." It swings freely enough now, and Leonarda guides Ermelina into the kitchen. She's known the woman for a long time, and they chat idly about this gossip and that as Leonarda takes her guest's coat into the back closet. Ermelina watches her with curiosity and a confused half-smile. She rubs her arms. It is mid-December, after all, and aren't they leaving soon? "Soon, yes," Leonarda says, smiling and waving a hand at her friend. "But once you're gone, I won't see you again for so long. Why don't you have a hot drink with me?" Ermelina obliges and takes a seat at the table where Leonarda usually reads tarot. She makes a show of turning her head left and right, and Leonarda realizes why. The old woman's hair is much darker. "You've dyed it. It looks wonderful, dear," Leonarda says. Ermelina bounces, making the sad, limp curls dance over her shoulders. "If I'm meeting this nice new gentleman today, I want to look my best," she says. "I still can't believe my luck. Such a man you've told me about shouldn't exist. And to think, he'd be interested in an old duffer like me. Can you tell me about him again?" Leonarda does, never missing a beat. She works in the kitchen with her back to her old friend as she describes a man, well-built, dark and handsome. It's her own son she's describing as though he was only an acquaintance, and she finds herself almost as smitten with the description as the fawning Ermelina. This imaginary man is much older than her boy, of course, and not related to her. But it's nice to think a simple description of Giuseppe would make any woman swoon. She brings 2 small cups of espresso to the table and nestles them down, pausing when she sees her guest has set the tarot out on the table. Ermelina looks up and touches a finger to her lips, realizing she's overstepped. "Oh, I'm so sorry, Leonarda," she says. "I thought maybe you could give me another reading for old time's sake." Ermelina smiles and leans in. "You know, just to confirm it's all going to be copacetic when we get to Pola." Leonarda grins and hesitates a moment before snatching the tarot up. Even just casually tossing the cards on the table, her old friend had turned up the Tower, the Five of Cups, and Death. All in an order that might have sent her running from the house any other day. "It's best that these things come as a surprise," Leonarda says with a forced friendliness. Her hand is shaking as she places the deck on a wooden shelf. "You wouldn't want to be nervous all the way to Pola because of a bad draw, only to find out the impending doom you were expecting was a flat tire." Armelina nods and reaches for one of the cups, which Leonarda quickly snatches off the table. The older woman is shocked. "Yours is without sugar," Leonarda says. "Doctor's orders." Armelina sighs and takes the other cup, sipping and nodding and looking around the room. A few small moments pass. They clear their throats, and Leonarda speaks first. "How are you feeling? Tired at all?" "No," Armelina says, setting the drink down and stretching her arms. "I'm just a little nervous about leaving home, you know. I've lived here so long." She stands and rubs her lower back. "But I think it's time to get going, yes?" "Letters," Leonarda blurts out, and Ermelina blinks, giving her another strange look. "You should write some letters before you go." Leonarda smiles and nods until Ermelina does as well, an old grifter's trick. "Postage is so expensive, and you have kept your departure today a secret, right? Why don't you write some letters ahead of time about how happy you are and how you're safe in Pola?" Ermelina nods and sits back down, seeing the wisdom of Leonarda's logic. It is expensive to have anything sent here or there, given the wartime prices. And there is always the chance the mail might be delayed for months. "Do you have paper?" Ermelina asks. Leonarda nods and starts walking to the other end of the shop. "Oh, wait." Leonarda freezes. "Here." Ermelina smiles and presses a stack of 30,000 lira into her friend's hands, cash enough for a down payment on a home in the city. "For my wonderful matchmaker. Thank you so much, Leonarda." Leonarda nods and accepts the money, jamming it down in her apron pockets. She gives Ermelina a few sheets of paper and a pen, taking care to make sure she hasn't written on them earlier or left any other marks. Then she busies herself in the kitchen as her guest writes. The heavy basin and cauldron she pulls from the back closet beside Ermelina's coat clang and clatter over the stone floor of the kitchen. She feels like a ghastly witch as she moves them into place where she needs them, all the while answering the odd spelling or grammar question from Ermelina. "Would he like me to say this about him? Do you think this is what I should write?" Leonarda returns to the table and looks down at Ermelina's papers, nodding and flipping through them before pulling one free and setting it down in front of the older woman. Her finger finds a spot on the page. "You should maybe add to this," Leonarda says, taking the other letters and stuffing them beside the money in her apron. Ermelina puts her cheek in her hand and dabs at the paper with her pen. She sighs, now sleepy from the dosed drink. "I'm not sure, Leonarda," she says. "I think..." The axe cuts her off mid-sentence, turning whatever word had just found her lips into a long, flatulent noise. Air escaping a balloon as her ruined brain tries desperately to make sense of what has just happened. Blood pours over Ermelina's eyes, mouth, and lips. Her jaw is working open and shut like a fish. Mindlessly. Her left palm is still straight up in the air as if holding a tray, elbow rested on the table. It hasn't received the message that her cheek is a bit further down now. Leonarda pulls back on the axe and her friend's destroyed face comes with it, blood pouring in a deluge as the metal axe head comes free of the wound. Ermelina's mouth is still working, though her eyes are blank and fixed on nothing. She could almost be uttering a single word over and over, Leonarda thinks, bringing the axe up and down again until her old friend stops shaking. "Pola," she might have been saying. "Pola."
It's no small task dragging Ermelina from behind the table. Leonarda grows frustrated quickly and ends up moving every piece of furniture in a huge swath, from her husband's dead body to the back closet. The weight isn't the issue. so much as the unwieldiness of the body. She half thinks it would have been prudent to have purchased a few meat hooks beforehand, or at least borrowed them from the butcher shop down the street. She tries dragging Ermelina by the arm and leg, but her hands are already too slippery with blood to really grasp the appendages. Eventually, she knots up the fabric of the dead woman's blouse and makes a sort of sling that works fairly well, though it pulls the clothing up over Ermelina's chest, exposing the pink and white-laced brassiere she'd put on for the trip. Leonarda drags the body through the kitchen and eventually stops to rest for just a second, looking at her friend's sad, dead old tits. They lay flat over her chest, deflated from the loss of blood already pooling in her shoulders, back, and buttocks. The bra covering them looks brand new in comparison to the ruin of the body it covers. Leonarda sobs once and then shakes her head briskly. She jerks Ermelina's body into the closet and uses a makeshift pulley system to hoist her legs up into the air. The basin is already under her friend's throat when Leonarda slits it. The blood is still surprisingly hot and stems as it fills the basin. The broad steel bucket seems to fill almost at once, then slows precipitously until Leonarda must step into the closet and massage the last of the blood out of Ermelina's legs and torso. The body is hung so that it lays face down in the bucket. The purplish deposits fade from Ermelina's legs as the body finishes draining. Most all of her head is submerged in the bucket of frothy, clotting blood. Only the pathetic black curls of primped and dyed hair remain above the surface. Leonarda is glad for that when she finds they're the only way for her to pull the head out of the basin when she needs to drag it across the kitchen. Ermelina's head comes free of the blood with a disgusting slurp, and Leonarda's heart thumps hard in her chest when she sees the dead woman's split face. Her eyes and mouth are completely open and fully covered with blood. The blackish red has removed all traces of humanity from her face, all the details she's come to know, the lines and ridges in her skin, the color of her eyes, all of it is gone. There is nothing but death now, the shocked and stupid brainless thing she's made of her friend. She wipes the clinging blood free and pulls the basin away with some effort. Ermelina continues to leak onto the floor while Leonarda sets the blood aside and readies the heavy knives she's kept sharp and prepared for just this moment. The butchery of Ermelina Faustina Seti is quick and efficient. Leonarda cuts away her legs and arms, then cores out her torso, setting the viscera aside on sheets of newspaper. The massive cauldron she's bought for this purpose is already boiling with a mixture of water and lye. Everything goes in as she cuts it away, though she has to wait then and again for certain parts to boil down enough to not be in the way. The smell is absolutely horrible, and she would consider leaving every window in the house open if that weren't such a stupid idea. The last thing to go in the pot is Ermelina's slack, bloody face. Leonarda goes to lift the head off the ground by the hair, but finds she can't make herself do it. Even now, this deep into the madness of it all, she can't shake the memory of her friends smiling and thinking of that fantasy boy in Pola, of Ermelina beaming and bouncing like a young woman, turning her new hair left and right to catch the dim lights of the little room where Leonarda would soon murder her. Instead, she takes the head lovingly by the cheeks. Et tu, Leonarda? Then drops it carefully in the caustic soda. It hisses and spits, then down it goes. The blood and flesh and bone are all burned away by the basic fluid, rendering all of Ermelina Seti down into a simple chemical sludge, a bone meal that would enliven any garden in Correggio. But Leonarda loads the slush remnants of her old friend into a series of pails that she travels through the city with to dump in cisterns and sewage drains. Before the stroke of midnight, there is nothing left of Ermelina but some clothing and a series of loving letters sent to a family who doesn't yet know to miss her, and several liters of blood drying in the kitchen of Leonarda Cianciulli.
Monstruo is an Incongruity Media production. If you've enjoyed this experience, please subscribe and leave a positive review. You can find out more by searching for Monstruo Podcast on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram, or visit us at monstruopodcast.com. This show is produced, hosted, and written by Jack Luna and Mike Boudet. Additional writing by Tyler Bell and Evan Ziegelman. Research by Hagar Barak. Sound design and editing by Jonathan McMichael and Robert Ravelli. Original score by Leon Rogers. Art by Denny Ray.